Hello everyone, this is Tom. I hope everyone is doing well. I'm going to talk about Canto 18 of Inferno today. It's a very important canto because it's really the first canto of the second part of Inferno. We have the 8th circle that's described between the 18th and the 30th cantos, so it's very expanded. It's got a relatively much bigger presence in Dante's Inferno. And in this area, we notice two very crucial changes. On one hand, Dante is abandoning almost completely his sense of compassion and empathy for the souls that he sees, with some slight exceptions. And on the other, it's with this canto, he starts a gradual descent into a much lower type of language. He basically decides to abandon those solemn and epic tones that he's been using up to now. If we think about all those classical examples and even the type of sentences, the type of words and terminology that he's been using, is now going to degrade itself, the language, together with the content of what we're going to see. It's very interesting because we notice how Dante is his own director, his own soundtrack composer, his own choreographer. The Divine Comedy is such a symphonic work that has so many elements about it that it almost seems like one of the master works in modern cinema. But Dante does all this by himself, and he really uses language as if it was the soundtrack, the let's say choreography, or at least scenography of his work, in a very, very clever way. So even if Canto 18 is one of the most self-explanatory ones, I would say, very easy to understand what's going on, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to talk about language a bit more than usual, and also to introduce a new and very original version of Dante's Inferno. Also, with Canto 18, we're going to see that Dante really starts embracing some comical tones that he has already approached in the previous cantos so far, between 1 and 18. But from now on, he's gonna push the accelerator on some comical tones. That goes hand in hand with the lower, more brutal tones of his language. We are not going to see any type of comical or funny, humoristic, ridiculous scenes in Purgatory, especially the higher that we get, and even less in Paradiso. But here, in the next cantos until the end of Inferno, we will see that. So the 18th canto starts with the description of Malebolge. It's a description of the location where they are, which Dante, as a literary technique, takes directly from Virgil and from other classics. Whenever there is a big change in scenery, a pretty thick description of the location helps the transition, and this is what he's doing here. He's starting by describing Malebolge. This is a term that he fundamentally made up. It's an invented name, Malebolge. I noticed that most English translations take the term and use it as it is, Malebolge, but some of them try to translate it in English, because Malebolge means evil pockets, mainly. For example, Kirkpatrick says rotten pockets. He calls it rotten pockets, which is original and in line with Kirkpatrick's freer translation. All that Dante describes here in terms of location, he saw from the air, from Gerion's shoulder. So this is what he's describing. And he's describing this structure that I'm going to show on a picture that is composed of 10 concentrical circles, at the center of which there is a Lucifer in Cogito, which is the lake of ice. Virgil and Dante arrive at the beginning of this eighth circle, and they see that it's made of stone. It's all dark gray. New tormentors, new torturers, new woes, they were headed towards us. They immediately see that it's so crammed with people, with souls, this first pocket, this first narrow valley, that it reminds Dante of the multitude gathered for the Jubilee in Rome. He's referring to the Jubilee that was proclaimed by Boniface VIII between the end of 1299 and the end of 1300. This is why probably he's using this comparison, because of how much Dante hated Boniface VIII, and the Jubilee was very much associated with Boniface VIII as a pope. So it's also a critic of the Pope in itself. In this first pocket or first round, Dante places the Panders and the seducers as sinners. In the second round, that we also will get to see at the end of this canto, are the Flatterers. In this type of metaphorical way, he has two very busy columns of people going in opposed directions, and it's very effective. It's very creepy, I think, in a sense. Here we find the first a very comedic comment, I think, or portion, where Dante says how terribly they forced them to be quick, the devils, these horned devils, lifting their heels. None waited to undergo the second or the third of the whippings. It's certainly something that can be rendered in a very comical way, visually, or even in translation. I noticed that, for example, Kirkpatrick translates into ouch. Even at the first stroke, they lifted their trotters, and none of them, for certain, stayed for second helpings, fewer still for thirds. This expresses even better, I think, this translation, the comedic tone of this paragraph, of this terzina. For Dante, comedy in this sense, in the modern sense, comedy that makes us laugh or ridicule, in a sense, was close to the lowest form of poetry. This is why he's pushing it in this part. A little bit lower, he is talking about somebody who he recognizes, this Venedico Caccianemico, and he was a leader of the Guelphs in Bologna, a politician that Dante knew, probably indirectly. He actually forced his sister to go to bed with the Marquis of Este for economical or political favors, and that brings you sauces of such a pungent kind. Dante is very blunt in addressing this guy with this sauces of pungent kind, which has been interpreted in many different ways. Yes, he's talking about sauces, literally, but also there was a little valley next to Bologna where this character was from, where they used to throw the corpses of people that were condemned late or with some type of problems in the court proceedings. So probably Dante might be referring to this as well when he says salse, which literally means sauces. And as I was mentioning, it's a canto that flows by itself with a lot of the descent from epic poetic language into much more vulgar and into actual swear words that exist still today in modern Italian is a little gradual within this canto, and then it will keep being like that for the rest of the Inferno. So it's interesting how this transformation happens, and more or less It happens right after the description of Jason and the two main women that he seduced, Hypsipyle and Medea. He seduced both of them in the famous Argonauts mission. So right after describing this classical reference, he really starts lowering the tone of his language when Pinsky translates, "I saw one there whose head was so befouled with shit." That's literally what Dante is saying. The word in ancient Italian is merda, and that's remained in modern Italian. And it's repeated before the end of the canto as well. Towards the end, there is a reference to a comic play of Terence called Eunuchus. In this play, there was a courtesan lady who was known in the Middle Ages. She was almost legendary in the Middle Ages for being a flatterer. However, Dante apparently didn't get this exactly right, because probably he took this reference indirectly from a Cicero book, and therefore, because Cicero didn't portray this story properly from Terence, Dante then, as a consequence, doesn't portray it fairly or correctly, because in Terence's play, she is the one who was flattered. She was not the flatterer, but Dante presents her as the flatterer, and it's so quick how in just one canto, Dante gives us three types of condemned souls: the Panders, the seducers, and the flatterers. It's very, very, very effective. There is another part where, towards the end of the 18th canto, where the language really becomes foul that Dante uses. And I want to give you an example here of how Pinsky translates. "Then my leader, Virgil, gave me advice: extend your gaze a little farther ahead, so that your eyes may fully observe the face of the disheveled strumpet, who in the mire scratches her body as she stands or squats. With shit-rimmed fingers she ties the whore." Okay, that's probably the most literal, because Dante does use the expression unghie merdose, which is literally what Pinsky says. Mark Musa, in this final part, he translates this way as follows. He finished speaking, and my guide began: "Lean out a little more, look hard down there, so you can get a good look at the face of that repulsive and disheveled trump, scratching herself with shitty fingernails, spreading her legs while squatting up and down." Slightly different use of words, but still as vulgar and foul as the original in Dante. Kirkpatrick, I think, uses the word "khaki," which I've never heard before. My leader now went on, "Just poke your nose a little further out. Your eyes may then be able to detect a slut down there, filthy, with tangled hair, scratching herself with khaki fingernails, squatting at one time, upright at the next. Ties, she's there, the whore." So it's... and Kirkpatrick also is a little bit more free in this translation. This is the Kirkpatrick translation that I'm using, that I'm reading. However, when it comes to being free in translating Dante and being very creative and outside of academia, I would say, when it comes to translating Dante, here is where I would like to properly introduce this book that I got recently called Dante Inferno by Sando Burke and Marcus Sanders. There are some very interesting features about this book. It's, in fact, this creative team produced not only Inferno, which is a faithful rendition. However, it's as Inferno is actually based in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is the background for Inferno, both visually and also in part in the text as well. They also did the Purgatory, that's based in San Francisco, and the Paradise, for some reason, is in New York. From the introduction, the book says, Burke and Sanders follow Dante's lead, but they add markers here and there that contemporary readers will surely recognize. To Dante's list of classical lovers in hell, they also add Clinton, Swaggart, and Baker. When Virgil describes for Dante the inhabitants of hell's eighth circle, Burke and Sanders put it this way: it's a veritable big pig pile of crooks, thieves, liars, conmen, simoniacs, forgers, pimps, drug dealers, grifters, schmoozers, moochers. They are using a lot of current or at least modern slang and almost some street language. In this sense, I say that while it might not be the most academic version of the Divine Comedy, it's a very admirable effort to do something that recalls what Dante did in his times, to lower, in a certain sense, the language from the Latin to the vernacular that in Tuscany was used, the street language. And another comment here, still from the introduction, Burke's vision of rampant decay in his illustrations that are inspired by Gustave Doré offers the careful viewer a stunning contemporary interpretation of the decidedly unhip hell that is not so far from any of us, if we dare look into the mirror he holds before us. The Inferno is a feast for the senses, especially the eyes. His illustrations astonishingly juxtapose the horror of Dante's vision with the modern cityscape, in this case Los Angeles. The night sky is not filled with stars, but the cold blue searchlights of police helicopters, devil-like, chasing modern-day sinners. Dark alleys, ugly streets, freeway overpasses, traffic signs, and commercial logos. It's really true. The illustrations reflect this hyper commercialized world of Los Angeles, even if this book is from 15 years ago. And the urban decay of many areas in Los Angeles. I'm going to show some of these pictures because they really deserve to be seen. And at the beginning of each canto, there are some smaller illustrations that are still very much linked with this urban environment of Los Angeles of the 2000s, or with commercial or marketing excesses of our current times. And finally, when it comes to the 18th canto, I would like to read only a couple of tertines from this particular version, how they render. In fact, if you remember the comment about the Germans in the previous canto, Burke, in this book, they translated as follows: if you ever go to Germany, where the people drink like fish, you'll sometimes see boats pulled only halfway out of the water, like crocodiles lying in wait. If you remember, this was a description of beavers. So again, like I was saying, the authors of this translation, the creators of this book, they take many liberties with Dante, but always with a certain sense behind it. So Canto 18, when Dante talks about Jason and the Golden Fleece, they interpret as follows. Is still impressive, even seeing him down there, because still Jason being a hero, Dante recognizes his relative greatness even in this in such a low level in hell, in Inferno. It says, he's still impressive, even seeing him down here. That's the original deadbeat dad, Jason of the Golden Fleece fame, who was able to trick the Colchians out of their golden ram. The deadbeat dad is obviously not a literal translation, but it kind of gives a modern spin on that meaning. And finally, when it comes to the moment when Dante is seeing a soul that he thinks he recognizes, this soul, he says, he yelled up at me, "Why the fuck are you looking at me? Am I any worse than this other poor fucks?" It's very foul, very vulgar, yes, but at the same time, it's not completely unexpected that somebody in that position would speak like that to Dante, exactly like that. So I don't discount this type of almost exaggeration in the translation, especially in these cantos from here on. And we'll see that the rest of Malebolge follows this type of approach as well. Somebody actually compared the physiognomy of Malebolge and the entire Inferno to a human body. If you think about it, you have all the cantos, all the circles that we have seen so far as potentially the trunk of a human body. And now we are getting into very concentrical circles and valleys, and which, in the opinion of some, may recall human intestines. Also because of the meaning and significance in terms of high and low, and what's more valuable and what's less, and what's cleaner, what's dirtier, with Lucifer at the very end or center of this Malebolge. I don't know if Dante thought about that. It's probably a good rule to expect Dante to have thought about most things, and this is not really me idealizing him. It's just once you read the whole work, you realize that he's been thinking about so many little details. Anyway, this is the 18th canto, and the next cantos as well are going to be a little bit easier, like this one, in terms of the effort to decipher at least what's going on. So thank you for watching. We'll speak soon.